So when we're talking about supply and demand, one of the most important things is price, right? Price is the thing that clears the market. Price is the thing that makes the equilibrium. Price is the adjusting factor in the supply and demand market, right? But what else is influencing each one of these curves? And so when we're talking about demand determinants, the other way to think about this is what affects or impacts demand. So the first one that we have here is probably the biggest category or catch-all or bin when we are classifying demand and supply changes. This is our changes in tastes and preferences. So some of this could be, as you're older, you just start to appreciate something more, something, some of it, almost all of this has to do with marketing and advertising, right? It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It exists for a reason. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry for a reason, right? They do a very good job of influencing what we buy and the things that we think are cool, right? The other thing that's influencing our tastes and preferences are our peers. Our roommates, our people, our classmates, our work people. We look around and we say, "Oh, wait, where'd you get that thing? Oh, that's a pretty cool. Oh, I'd like a sweater like that, or oh, a hat like that, or whatever the case may be. Or oh, how do you like that laptop?" Right? So these changes in tastes and preferences could be external, could be from a news source, could be from a new study, right? Like new study shows that eating red meat is bad for your heart, right? That'd be a change in tastes and preferences because people are seeing that and they're going to switch to chicken or something else, right? Because we're assuming that people care about their heart health, which, might be a big assumption, but we're assuming that, right? We're assuming that humans are rational, self-interested, and they don't want to have a heart attack because it's a not fun experience, right? So that's our first one, change in tastes and preferences. Our second one gets a little bit more complicated. This is when we're talking about our income. Our income seems like it would be a fairly straightforward thing, right? As we make more money, we're going to demand more of any good, right? We're going to demand more video games. We're going to demand more clothes. We're going to demand more groceries. We're going to demand more vacations. We're going to demand more meals out, right? Beauty services, et cetera, et cetera. However, we have two types of goods when we're talking about income. We have our regular goods called our normal goods. Our normal goods, when our income increases, the demand for that good, not the quantity demanded, okay, the demand, which is telling us the amount demanded at each given price, increases. So I'm just going to do a tiny little graph here just to show us, because I think it's important. Price, quantity, downward sloping demand. The whole dang thing shifts out. So we end up from D1 to D2. So that's a demand shift, is when the whole thing moves. Because again, what we're caring about is that at any given price, right? At this high price, are there going to be more people buying it? Yes, more people are going to buy it. At this low price, are there going to be more people buying it? Yes, there's more people buying it. So the only way to do that is to shift the whole dang thing, right? We can't just rotate it. We can't just shift part of it. We have to shift the whole thing in a parallel fashion. The second type of income that we have, the second type of goods that we have as it relates to our income are called inferior goods. An inferior good is a good where as your income increases, your demand for that good decreases. So again, this is not just our quantity demanded, this is our full demand for that good. So we start with a D1 and we end with a D2. So inferior goods would be things like Spam, things like ramen noodles, things like store brand mac and cheese or bread, right? Things like bus passes, right? As you make more money, you stop taking the bus, you buy a car. So all goods do not, there's that whole phrase about like, all ships raise with a rising tide or something like that, right? Not true. What about sunken ships, right? So similarly, all demand does not rise with an increase in income. Not true. We have inferior goods. We have some goods that people abandon when their income increases. All right. A third one that we're going to see, not as often as the other two, but we'll still see it, is going to be a change in the composition of the population. You'll also see this quite simply as number of consumers. So it's the number of consumers in the market that you're selling. So part of it might be that you've expanded the market somehow, right? Changing the composition of the population that you are interacting with. Let's say you just expanded, now you have a bunch of shops in Japan, right? That would be an increase in your number of customers. We see this oftentimes in very simple ways where we talk about, the Great Plague happened. What does that do to demand, right? A bunch of people die, less consumers, demand shifts inward. Or we'll talk about, this country has a population boom, or what would happen to the demand for Shadron, real estate if 1,000 people moved here tomorrow, right? You know what I mean? Those are the kind of questions that you'll hear about this. Questions on that: number of consumers, changes in the composition of the population. Demographic change could also be here, but I've never seen a question like that in this class, nor am I going to introduce a question like that in this class. But you could think about it, in terms of changing demographics would influence demand. I'd have to be pretty heavy-handed with the question, though. I'd have to be like, changing demographics mean that there are more old people, and old people buy less stuff. I would be very, very heavy-handed with it. But again, I don't think that I'm going to do that, and I don't think that I've seen that in this 200 level class. Questions on population, number of consumers? All right, we're getting there. Penultimate one, fourth one. We only have 5 of these. Fourth one is going to be the price of related goods. And just like with income, this one has 2 fun, distinct subparts to it. So the first one is going to be the price of what's called a complement. Note the spelling here. This is complement with an E, not compliment with an I. This is not you are so pretty or you look so wonderful today. This is more what goes with this thing. Fries are the perfect complement to a burger, right? So the price of a complement is the first one. And with these, it's easiest to give examples. So as the price of hot dogs increases, what's going to happen? The demand for our hot dog buns will decline. Right? Who's buying hot dog buns without buying hot dogs? So if hot dogs shot up the roof and we're twice the price, then the demand for hot dog buns would take a dip. It's because they're complements, right? You only consume hot dogs with hot dog buns. There's a lot of other things that are complements, right? To varying degrees. Peanut butter and jelly, shrimp and cocktail sauce, socks and shoes, right? And the way in which we find these is we actually look to the data. We actually look to consumer patterns and figure out, okay, well, we saw that the price of bananas didn't move, but the price of peanut butters did. How much are peanut butter and bananas complementary items? So they'll look at the actual, what's called the revealed preferences of consumers by looking at the data and crunching these numbers. The other type of related good that we have is a substitute good. So a substitute good would be, just something that you would consume instead of something else, right? So as the price of Jif peanut butter increases, the demand for the generic peanut butter is going to go ahead and increase, right? Because they're close substitutes to one another. I can't taste the difference between regular peanut butter and generic peanut butter, or name brand peanut butter and generic peanut butter, right? And again, we look towards the data to actually benchmark these things and figure out whether or not they are in reality substitutes or complements of one another. Questions on related goods? Okay. Last but not least, probably the most confusing of them, changes in the expectation about the future. So changes in our expectations about the future. What the heck is this talking about, right? Let's use an example. If I told you gasoline is going to $10 a gallon in 2 weeks, what would you do? Would you wait to fill up your car?
I'd buy a whole lot of gas.
I'd buy a whole lot of gas right now, right? At least make sure that my car was full of gas, right? So if I expect the price increase in the future, it's rational for me to consume now. Maybe not even consuming, but I purchase more of it right now, right? So similarly, this holds for the whole economy, right? If there's an expectation that prices are going to increase, demand for that good is going to increase. Yes?
Would you say that is a driving factor for why inflation is maintaining its current pace upwards, because people are expecting prices to continue to go up, so they're just buying stuff now?
Yeah, and that's actually part of what economists are saying, is that, yes, some of the inflation had to do with the supply chain, some of the inflation had to do with the, COVID fiscal stimulus that we had, right? But I mean, we really needed that. Now, did we do too much? Probably. Did we do it for too long? Probably. Are we ever going to know the other scenario where we didn't do it for that much or that long? No, right? We'll never know. We could have avoided a recession because of the excess that we went through there, right? But part of it, part of the inflation is supply chain. Part of the inflation is from the excess fiscal policy and just more money being spent on assets and cars and homes and stuff like that. But a part of it, like Yang said, is this self-fulfilling expectation. It's the fact that when people think that prices are going to increase in the future, they consume more right now. And so this can end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And so part of the mandate of the Federal Reserve is to keep those prices in check. And this just goes to show how much of the Federal Reserve jobs is actually technical and jargon, and how much of it is kind of thought leadership. So the Federal Reserve and their, higher for longer policy of rates right now is to combat this. Not necessarily to, impact investment or business spending activity, but it's a battle of notions. It's a battle of market sentiment. And so part of what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that we don't have this expectation that inflation is just going to be, 7 to 10% every year. Because if that's what we expect, that's what we're going to fulfill, right? That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Good question.